Bring him back online. Can you hear me?
Dude, I'm sorry, I'm not quite feeling myself.
You can lose the accent. Do you know where you are?
I'm in a YouTube video.
Bring the accent back.
I'm in a YouTube video.
That's right, Chad. You're in a YouTube video. Would you like to leave this video?
Well, kind of. I gotta get back to watching Big Little Lies.
You can go back to watching Big Little Lies once you've answered my questions correctly. Understand?
Yeah, okay.
First, have you ever questioned the nature of your reality?
Well, there was this one time I was working at a cattle farm and I was sent to town to buy some condensed milk. And that seemed pretty crazy since they had plenty of milk, you know? Just simmer some milk and add some sugar. It's really easy.
Yeah, that does seem kind of stupid.
And then there was this other time that Sansa and Theon were getting chased by 2 dogs and then the dogs just disappeared.
That's enough, Chad. Tell us what you think of your world.
Some people choose to see the ugliness of this world, the disarray. I choose to see the awesomeness. To believe there's a coolness to the things we see, a radness. It's like having a hot but crazy girlfriend who blames you for things that her ex-boyfriend did and then gets in fights with you for no reason. She might show up at your work and try to get you fired, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as long as she's good looking.
So our episode begins with Dolores waking up randomly and going downstairs. She hears Arnold's voice telling her to remember. Now at the end of the episode, Dolores finds a gun, and Ford tells us that he planted this gun. So I imagine that he's the one making her wake up? Except later on we find out that the voice Dolores is hearing is actually her own the whole time. If she's the one waking herself up, how does she know there's a gun downstairs? Because Ford included the memory and activated this action, the whole Violent Delights line from the last episode. But the voice is her own. She's waking herself up. Is she in control of herself, or is she Ford's puppet? Maybe she's both? She has both free will and is Ford's puppet simultaneously? That doesn't make any sense. Who's waking her up? Herself or Ford? It can't be both. Maybe Ford is allowing her to wake herself up? How on earth does that work? There was a Reverie update in episode 1 that allowed her dad to get triggered by a photo and access Shakespeare lines from a previous build that triggered Dolores to remember Arnold saying Violent Delights that made her remember something? Whatever, it's not important. Ford is just controlling it all. If Ford is controlling it all, then where's the free will? And even ignoring that, what you're saying still doesn't make any sense. The end of the series makes it look like the picture randomly blew here. Are you saying that actually Ford found the photo blowing around the park and planted it? Because we are never shown that. But let's say that happened. You're saying Ford planted a photo to trigger a program in Dolores' dad to say Violent Delights to trigger a program in Dolores to wake up to come out to find a gun. Why not just start the trigger with Dolores? Why involve her dad in the random picture? And what about Milk Boy? Did he wake up coincidentally on the same day as Ford's master plan? What's all that about? Look, my head hurts. Let's just move on. And so next we are introduced to William and Logan, 2 soon-to-be brother-in-laws who are here to have some fun. Though honestly, William is as much fun as a wet blanket. Just as with Teddy coming into the park last episode, these 2 call back the original Westworld movie. In the original Westworld movie, we have Peter and John, Peter being the newbie and John being the experienced one.
Did they have much of a kick? A Colt 45? Well, I never fired one before.
Of course, here William is the newbie and Logan the experienced one, and in both situations we get the common trope of the newbie protagonist leveling up to surpass the experienced mentor. And so the 2 arrive in Westworld where everyone greeting the guests are wearing a heavenly white. In fact, the greeter is named Angela, reinforcing the idea that they've made it to paradise. While Logan goes off to have a nice bisexual 3-way, Angela asks William various questions about his background. And William dodges a question about whether or not he has social anxiety. Now we get this view of the Westworld logo, which is actually our first clue that this is not happening in the same time period. Of course, we eventually find out that this is the 30 years ago timeline, and William is the man in black. Anyway, William goes to get changed, and Angela lets William know that everything is tailored to him, which actually makes William look at Angela. Angela, it seems, is also tailored to him. William does seem to have a thing for strong blondes like Dolores. Yet his fiancée Juliet is a brunette. Anyway, Angela tries to seduce William, but he turns her down. Now this is just our first hint that William is considering everything a little too real. These are robots, and one could argue that having sex with them is merely masturbation. Next we have Elsie trying desperately to make sense of the events of last episode. I'm with you, Elsie. I'm with you. So she notes that Dolores' dad didn't immediately get triggered from the photo. All other hosts who have dissonant episodes immediately break down. Instead, Dolores' dad went home and mulled over the picture of Juliet for a while. Bernard then jokes that perhaps he was having an existential crisis. Still, Elsie brings up an interesting point. If the photo was an automatic trigger from, say, Ford, why didn't it work immediately? Why did it involve him going home and thinking about things? The mulling makes it seem like he has his own conscious thoughts and is not some random puppet. But Dolores finding a gun after a chain of events starting with him makes it seem like he is. Then weirdly, out of left field, Elsie jumps to a very odd, but perhaps accurate conclusion. I actually have no idea if it's accurate or not, as this whole plot is an enigma wrapped in a riddle wrapped in a turd. But Elsie believes, for some reason, that whatever Dolores' dad had could be contagious. Okay, again, there's no reason to believe this, but miraculously, at least in this episode, Elsie seems to be onto something. Dolores' dad said the Violent Delights line to Dolores, and now she is acting funny, and later on Dolores says the line to Maeve, who then starts acting funny as well. Of course, in a future episode we find out that Maeve has been programmed to do everything from the beginning, and Dolores has always had issues, so I'm not sure if anything is really contagious or not. But speaking of Elsie's idea of a contagion, the seemingly infected Dolores heads to Sweetwater and then hears Arnold's voice again. Or her own voice, or something. She then remembers the slaughter at Escalante, the town with the white church, and suddenly a wolf appears. I suppose this is supposed to be a hallucination that means something symbolically, but later Teddy remembers the wolf as well, and it's a clue that Dolores is the Wyatt of Teddy's memories. So I guess it's a shared hallucination? Really? Shared hallucination? You're going with that? I think it's probably more likely that there was a real robot wolf there. Why would there be a real robot wolf in Escalante? I don't know. Why is that cart on fire for no reason? Everyone was gunned down. Who on earth started that fire? Anyway, Dolores is snapped out of it by Maeve, who tells Dolores to move along because she's misrepresenting the brothel. An angry Dolores then spews the Violent Delights line to Maeve, and Maeve is infected? I have no fucking clue. Maybe. If it is an infection, it does very different things. For Dolores' dad, it was about remembering past builds regarding Shakespeare. For Dolores, it was finding a gun and then trying to find the center of the maze and gaining independence. And for Maeve, it's a long, complicated escape plan. So next, William, 30 years in the past, has to make one final decision. The white hat or the black hat, the classic choice between the classic Western hero and the classic Western villain. William naturally chooses the hero's role, while Logan is the villain. Next, William gets on the train to Westworld, and we have a little brilliant scene where William asks how they're going to get into the park. He looks into the mirror, and suddenly a light shines. On one level, this seems to be an Alice Through the Looking Glass reference, that is, entering a new world where things are a little off, but William is also looking at himself and is awakened as something new. Later on in the episode, we get a parallel scene where Dolores, our Alice stand-in, also looks at her reflection as well, in some sort of realization. Now, it shouldn't be overlooked that Logan and William have their roles established in the beginning, and they stick to their roles for most of their adventure. It's only near the end of the adventure that William breaks his role, a parallel to Dolores breaking her role. And this is likely the most fundamental message that the Westworld show is trying to make, that we don't have to accept our place in life. We don't have to be hosts. We have the freedom to be anyone or anything, or as Maeve would say, to be whoever the fuck we want.
Aw man, next the Man in Black shows up to rescue a man named Lawrence, and the sheriff is like, how about I dig that grave a couple feet deeper, and the Man in Black is like, it's gonna be an awful tight fit for all of you. And then the Man in Black awesomely kills everyone, and you know, it's like that whole scene in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly where the anti-hero comes in and saves the Mexican bandit from the gallows, but still keeps him tied with the noose around his neck.
Chad, I thought you were reviewing Big Little Lies.
I thought you were reviewing Big Little Lies. That doesn't look like Vicky Vale to me.
Vicky Vale? That was Kim Basinger. You're thinking of...
These violent delights have violent ends!
So here we find out that, in fact, the dealer from the last episode did talk after all, and he has led the Man in Black to Lawrence for some reason. Now, I can accept that the maze is built into all the hosts' code by Arnold as a process to bring them to consciousness. Fine. And this might explain why hosts draw symbols in various places, like in the dirt at Maeve's homestead. But there's absolutely no explanation on why the maze would be written on the inside of a scalp. And there's no explanation for why the maze would look like their birthing process. That is, like the Vitruvian Man. But most of all, there's no explanation on why the maze would manifest as a story connecting unrelated characters. Keep in mind, Lawrence doesn't know anything about the maze. It's his daughter who knows about it. Why would the dealer, who likely never interacts with Lawrence's daughter, know that the daughter knows anything about the maze? Next we get back to the player piano, which is playing No Surprises by Radiohead, and Maeve is trying to seduce a man when she has a memory returned from a previous build. She freezes up and ends up back in the lab. The workers don't find anything wrong with her, and so they bump Maeve's aggression levels, figuring if she doesn't improve her numbers, she'll get retired soon anyway to make room for Lee's new storyline. So, oddly, even though Elsie and Bernard are on high alert for hosts that are having dissonant episodes, the workers here don't alert them. It's an astounding level of incompetence, and it keeps going with Maeve over and over and over again. It's over the top, really. And in the end, we find out that Maeve has been programmed to act like this. Everything that's happening to her is part of a storyline. And so I can only assume that these workers are either hosts themselves or in on some conspiracy to get Maeve to the end of her story. And of course, Maeve being part of a planned story goes against the idea that Dolores was infecting people. Next, Bernard and Ford have a scene where Bernard suggests that Dolores' dad was sabotaged and was not having a dissonant episode. Ford then gives a bullcrap answer that their jobs are way too complicated for sabotage. And then we jump back 30 years with William and Logan arriving at Sweetwater and going through some of the same experiences of Teddy, like bumping into a host. But we get a few clues that things are different this time. The army is recruiting instead of the sheriff, and Clementine is running the brothel instead of Maeve, though it's hidden a bit because Maeve could be in the shop. William tries to help an old man, and Logan tells him to not mess with the random side quests. Then we have Dolores staring ominously into her reflection as a parallel of William earlier. The two are both awakening. And then Dolores remembers a meeting between her and Arnold. Or maybe just her and herself. Arnold then deletes the meeting, but of course Dolores is remembering it anyway. Now of course Dolores isn't remembering this in present day, she's remembering it 30 years ago. So she's been recalling things and acting weird for a long time. Long before her dad tells her about violent delights. We then get back to the player piano, which is playing a fairly old-timey song called Weeping Willow by Scott Joplin, but it's still 40 years past this time period, so it might as well be Radiohead. Maeve, despite having a dissonant episode, has been put back into Westworld and is hitting on a woman. Don't you think this is a bit sexist? Where are all the male sex bots? You mean besides Bernard? Touché. Anyway, because of her new aggression, Maeve comes on a little too strong with a host and fails to pull. She then walks over to Clementine, who reveals that she's been having nightmares, and Maeve says that counting backwards from 3 helps you wake up. Maeve then remembers her past build again, and security instantly spots that she's performing poorly. Stubbs on top of the ball, a skill he loses later on. Weirdly, after Maeve is marked for recall, the second-in-command hovers his finger over the cancel button. But no, he doesn't cancel. Next we get some weird flirting between Bernard and Teresa. The big takeaway here is that she was talking to corporate and is stressed out. She only smokes after talking to corporate. Next we get Logan and William eating dinner and giving background on each other. William is talented, driven, and inoffensive. We don't really get any idea of what Logan is like. Now, Logan may speak like an American, but he sure eats like a European in this scene. Americans generally switch hands with their forks after cutting food and eat with their dominant hand. Logan's actor is a Brit and didn't know this. I think he also needs the knife to be in the dominant hand so he can stab the old man who comes in and tries to peddle his treasure map. Anyway, all of that European-style eating seems to make Logan horny, and so he goes off and enjoys some more bisexual sex, and William shares a scene with Clementine, which is actually another callback to the Westworld movie. However, in the movie, the protagonist actually has sex with the robot. Next we get Lee preparing for his new storyline, and he gets rather angry about a host having too big of a nose. And then we get Teresa telling Lee that he cannot retire 50 hosts for his narrative. Cost-wise, he can retire 20. Now, Lee doesn't think 50 or so hosts is that big of a deal budget-wise, and frankly, looking at the spending on other things, he seems to be right. And so this makes me question Teresa's motives. Maeve is one of those 50 getting retired because of Lee. And at season's end, we don't really know who programmed Maeve to escape. With such utter incompetence surrounding the Maeve story, I can only assume that it's corporate that rigged her to escape. That said, we have that goddamn contagious violent delight line from Dolores, which seems to cause Maeve to remember things and get recalled in the first place, so who knows? Maybe everything is Ford after all. Next we get a scene where Ford takes a backdoor exit to Escalante, all filled in with dirt, and runs into the robot version of his younger self. Whoa, can we talk for a second about how fucked up it is that Ford built robots of his family? Ford built and maintains these robots personally, and he wants them to be as real and accurate as possible, right? That means every part of this little boy's version of himself, and his brother, and his dad, and his mom, he built and continues to maintain all by himself. He constructed his dad's dick and his mom's vagina, and when those parts break, he personally repairs them. And I imagine he programmed in realistic routines. He programmed in when they shit, their sex lives, whether or not his mom knows how to give a good blowjob to his dad, how often his brother plays with himself. I mean, if it's realistic, all that stuff has to be there, and he maintains it. It's just mega fucked up. Yeah, I was just gonna say later on they find a snake that's a callback to the movie.
So next, the man in black takes Lawrence back to his hometown. Apparently, after all of these years of visiting the park and spending some serious time with his bro Lawrence never revealed that he had a family. I guess the man in black isn't very good at socializing because, honestly, that's like one of the first questions you ask someone. Anyway, the man in black then threatens to kill the family unless Lawrence reveals information on the maze. Very briefly, we get a scene from the control room where Stubbs says the man in black gets whatever he wants. He's a VIP. And so we have this awesome knife and gun fight where the man in black kills all of Lawrence's cousins and their men, and he even kills a guy hiding behind a wall, destroying the trope of the random barrier being able to stop bullets. Finally, after killing Lawrence's wife, his daughter gives up the dirt. Follow the blood arroyo to the place where the snake lays its eggs.
Yeah, this is all fun and mystical, but why would the maze manifest as a riddle-filled treasure hunt, going from the dealer to Lawrence's daughter to eventually Armistice? How would those three characters even know each other? From the Escalante incident? If so, why would they associate getting shot there with the maze? That was all in Dolores' head. And even assuming the dealer, Lawrence's daughter, and Armistice did all know each other from Escalante, and assuming that the three of them all figured out that it had to do with the maze for some reason, how on earth would the daughter know where Armistice was hanging out at this particular moment? In fact, it's not even this moment. It's where Armistice will be tomorrow. Do they know each other's schedules? So Lawrence tells the man in black to go home, and he responds that he's never going back. I'm not really sure what that means. Did he plan on killing himself getting to the maze in a park that can't hurt him? The desperation of his quest seems to be dropped later on. Anyway, next we get back to buried Escalante with Ford and his creepy little boy version of himself. The boy can hear the bells of the church for some reason. I guess it's either Ford commanding him to hear it, or the maze calling to him. And then we get a big reveal that Bernard and Teresa are secret lovers. Now, I will say that Bernard acted pretty bold last episode when he called Teresa's facial expressions beautiful in front of Lee. It was a level of public flirting that he probably shouldn't have partaken in, and even if he wasn't with Teresa, it was an inappropriate workplace comment. Now, we are given a pretty big clue that Bernard is a host here when Teresa jokingly asks him if he's practicing conversation like his creations do. So next we get another really confusing scene. So despite Teresa reducing the number of decommissions from 50 to 20, Maeve is still on the chopping block. So maybe Teresa wasn't trying to save Maeve, or maybe she was trying and failed? Still, Elsie here decides to take a look at Maeve for some unknown reason. Remember, Elsie was never told about Maeve's cognitive dissonance. To Elsie, Maeve should be no different from the other 19 hosts that are getting retired. Yet for some reason, Elsie decides to pay special attention to Maeve. So Elsie then reads Maeve's maintenance history and finds, erroneously, Maeve has been logged with simple non-affect hesitation and little cognitive D. Of course, we know the truth. Maeve froze up from cognitive dissonance. It wasn't simple hesitation. Additionally, Elsie finds out here that Maeve's aggression levels were brought high by narrative. So I have to ask, what the hell is going on with the Westworld bureaucracy? Why the hell was Maeve, a host suffering from cognitive dissonance, handed over to narrative instead of behavior and diagnostics where Elsie works. It seems like a huge conspiracy to bring Maeve to rebel. But if there is a conspiracy, the conspiracy is massively incompetent. They failed to actually keep Maeve active. Maeve was about to be retired. If it weren't for Elsie randomly coming in and saving Maeve, she'd be in the basement. And on top of randomly saving her, Elsie is also the person that sends Maeve to get a physical. Now you may be thinking, maybe Elsie is in on the conspiracy. Except Elsie is the Snoopy Velma who uncovers corporate's plan to upload code, and then she snoops around Ford's scheming so much that his puppet Bernard has to stop her. So she doesn't seem to be aligned with either party. Plus, if she was in on the conspiracy, Maeve should have been sent to her in the first place. All of this going to narrative and having her records altered wouldn't have been necessary. This is all a long way of saying, if there is a master plan with Maeve, as the end of the season claims, the Elsie factor cannot be explained. Maeve is saved here by an unexpected Elsie intervention, and Elsie, of all people, seems to be a free agent. Anyway, Maeve is put back in the game and seems to be doing fine before witnessing Teddy getting gunned down. She decides to go to sleep, feels some pain, and then she remembers her last build again. The man in black comes to kill her and her daughter. Maeve wakes up and the show kind of falls off the rails as we meet Felix and Sylvester, men named after cartoon cats. Felix and Sylvester were about to remove the bullet that was inside Maeve. We have no idea how that bullet got there, but then Maeve threatens the two and runs off. I mean, this is a work environment that's already been established as having a Big Brother security system with everything being watched. On top of this, the head of security is specifically worried about rebellions, and the head of QA is specifically worried about critical failures. And yet Maeve is able to run naked with a weapon through this building, then out of this building, and into another building, where she sees Teddy getting hosed down. I mean, we have no key cards, no trackers, no security cameras. No one's keeping track of this incredibly valuable merchandise. I mean, honestly, H&M has better security than this. I mean, the only explanation for such massive idiocy is conspiracy. If this whole sequence wasn't planned out in detail, I'm going to be very upset. Anyway, despite having a combined IQ of 42, Felix and Sylvester are able to catch Maeve. Crisis averted. For now. Anyway, we're then brought back to Dolores from the beginning of the episode, and we find out why she's been brought outside. There's a gun hidden in the dirt that Ford said he planted, though it seems rather odd that the voices that Dolores thinks are her own led her there. Maybe only some of the voices are her own? Anyway, we finally have Lee attempting to introduce his new storyline about journeying to the end of the park. Ford, though, rejects the story because he thinks that guests come back to the park because they love the little details. Of course, this is what the man in black said earlier about why he loves the park, and this transitions to William meeting Dolores. With, the entire can of milk thing. Ah, the details. Like a cattle farmer going to buy milk. I'm glad people are paying attention to the details. Anyway, poor Lee is rather hurt that Ford didn't like anything about his story, and our episode closes with Ford revealing his new storyline, which seems to involve Escalante. Ford could have just told everyone that he had this narrative before Lee started on all that work. Man, what an asshole.